empathy, attracting predators like moths to a flame. By stage 4, you've become completely immune to their manipulation. But it's stage 2 that breaks most empaths. And if you can survive it, you become unbreakable. Picture this moment. You're sitting alone after another devastating encounter with someone who promised to love you, but systematically destroyed your sense of self instead. You've given everything, your energy, your boundaries, your very soul, only to be discarded like yesterday's newspaper. You wonder, how did this happen to me again? Jung understood this pattern better than anyone. He wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But for empaths, this understanding comes at a terrible price. What Jung called the collision with the shadow happens not just within themselves, but through the predatory behavior of those who exploit their light. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. The empath's gift isn't just sensitivity. It's what I call unconscious truth detection. Jung observed that highly sensitive people can perceive what others hide, even when they don't realize they're doing it. You see through facades without trying. You feel the pain behind someone's anger. You sense the emptiness behind their charm. Jung wrote, "Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." But this gift comes with a dark side. Narcissists are drawn to empaths for the same reason moths are drawn to flames. Your light reveals their darkness, and they need that light to feel alive. But unlike the moth that dies in the flame, the narcissist tries to extinguish the light instead. What I call Jung's vampire dynamic, where one person feeds on another's life force. Jung understood this as psychological parasitism, though he used different terms. And empaths, with their natural giving nature, become the perfect prey. Jung identified specific patterns in how predators exploit highly sensitive people. What I call the 4 stages of empathic destruction, but understanding these stages is the key to breaking free from the cycle forever. Stage 1. The light trap. Jung understood that empaths are born with what he called an overflow of libido, not sexual energy, but life energy. This creates what I call the empathic magnetism. You naturally radiate warmth, understanding, and acceptance. People feel safe around you before they even know why. In childhood, this shows up as the kid who comforts others when they cry, who can't stand to see anyone left out, who feels physical pain when witnessing cruelty. Jung observed that these children often become what he termed the family healer, taking on everyone's emotional burdens. But here's the trap. Your light doesn't just attract good people seeking healing. It attracts predators seeking supply. Jung wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking." Narcissists operate from pure will to power, and your love becomes their feeding ground. The narcissist studies you during this stage. They watch how you respond to sob stories, how you react to their vulnerability, how much you'll give before you start to question. They're not falling in love with you. They're cataloging your weaknesses. What I call the reconnaissance phase of psychological manipulation, building on Jung's understanding of how predators study their targets. The predator maps your empathic responses like a general mapping enemy territory. They learn exactly which buttons to press to keep you giving, caring, and sacrificing. Comment if you've ever felt like a magnet for broken people. I attract what needs healing. But you don't recognize this as predation because it feels like being needed, being special, being the one person who truly understands them. Jung warned about this trap. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But in stage 1, you're becoming who they need you to be. Stage 2, the soul extraction. If stage 1 is the trap, Then stage 2 is what I call the great devouring. Jung observed that narcissists don't just want your love, they want to consume your entire psychic energy. This is where the real psychological warfare begins. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But with narcissists, only you transform, and not in a healthy way. You become smaller while they become more inflated." Jung called this projection, but what I call projection bombardment, an overwhelming assault where the narcissist projects all their shame, rage, and inadequacy onto you. Suddenly, you're the one who's too sensitive, too needy, too much. They rewrite history to make you the problem in every conflict. But the most insidious part is what I call empathic inversion. Your natural gift of feeling others' emotions becomes a weapon against you. When they rage, you feel responsible for their anger. When they withdraw, you feel guilty for their distance. When they cheat, you wonder what you did to drive them away. Jung understood this as the shadow projection process. The narcissist cannot face their own darkness, so they project it onto you. And because you're empathic, you absorb it as if it were your own. You start believing their version of reality, where you're the broken one who needs fixing. The psychological torture of this stage is that you're being punished for the very qualities that make you good. Your compassion is labeled as weakness. Your boundaries are called selfish. Your needs are dismissed as drama. What I call the crucifixion of the authentic self, though Jung would have described this as ego dissolution under psychological pressure. You find yourself walking on eggshells, constantly monitoring their moods, shape-shifting to avoid their wrath. What I call hypervigilant empathy. Your nervous system stays activated 24/7, trying to predict and prevent their next emotional explosion. Jung observed that prolonged exposure to this kind of psychological abuse creates what he described as dissociation, but what I call soul fragmentation. Parts of your authentic self go into hiding to survive. You lose touch with your own needs, your own desires, your own truth. Stage 3, the dark night of the soul. Jung wrote, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." Stage 3 is your journey to hell, the complete collapse of everything you thought you knew about love, about yourself, about reality itself. This is what I call the empathic breakdown. Your giving nature, which once felt unlimited, hits empty. Your capacity for understanding, which seemed infinite, reaches its limit. Your ability to make excuses for their behavior finally crumbles under the weight of truth. Jung called this the dark night of the soul, a necessary psychological death that precedes rebirth. But in the moment, it feels like you're dying. Jung observed psychological compensation in patients under extreme stress, but what I call acute psychological decompensation, anxiety, depression, physical illness, a complete inability to function. The narcissist often intensifies their abuse during this stage because they sense your awakening. They launch what I call the final harvesting campaign, love bombing mixed with increased cruelty, designed to extract every last drop of your empathic energy before you escape. Comment if you've been through rock bottom and found strength there. My breakdown became my breakthrough. But here's what Jung understood that most people miss. This breakdown isn't pathology, it's psychology. It's your psyche's way of forcing you to confront the truth you've been avoiding. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." In stage 3, you're forced to accept that you've been participating in your own destruction. You start questioning everything. The relationship, yes, but more importantly, yourself. How did I let this happen? Why did I stay so long? What is wrong with me? Jung called these the fundamental questions that arise during individuation. But what I call the questions of individuation become especially acute during this stage. The painful but necessary inquiry that leads to psychological wholeness. This stage often involves what Jung termed the confrontation with the shadow. Not their shadow, but your own. You must face the parts of yourself that enabled the abuse. Your people-pleasing, your conflict avoidance, your addiction to being needed. Jung understood that healing requires owning your contribution without taking responsibility for their behavior. The breakthrough comes when you realize that your empathy isn't the problem. It's your lack of boundaries around it. Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The narcissist irritated you because they mirrored your own abandoned self, the part of you that you sacrificed to keep them happy." Stage 4, the Phoenix Rebirth. Jung believed that individuation, becoming who you truly are, requires integrating all aspects of the psyche, including the shadow. Stage 4 is where the empath achieves what I call shadow-integrated empathy. Compassion combined with discernment, love combined with boundaries. You emerge from stage 3 fundamentally changed, not broken, but refined, not bitter, but wiser. You've developed what Jung called differentiated consciousness, the ability to feel others' emotions without absorbing them as your own. The most terrifying thing for narcissists is an empath who has completed their individuation process. You can still see their pain, still sense their emptiness, still recognize their wounded inner child, but you're no longer compelled to fix it.
Fuck yeah.
Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." In stage 4, you choose yourself, not selfishly, but consciously. You understand that your empathy is a gift to be protected, not a resource to be exploited.
Fuck yeah.
You develop what I call boundaried compassion, the ability to love others without losing yourself. This transformation creates what Jung termed the autonomous personality, someone who operates from their own center rather than reactive patterns. Narcissists can no longer hook you with drama, guilt, or manipulation, because you've learned to distinguish between their emotions and your own. You become what I call empathically sovereign. You give from choice, not compulsion. You help from strength, not weakness. You love from fullness, not emptiness. And this terrifies narcissists because they can no longer feed on your energy. If you've become immune to manipulation tactics, comment, "I see the game, but I don't play anymore." The narcissist will try everything to pull you back into the old dynamic. Love bombing, threats, smear campaigns, using wild accusations. But none of it works because you've achieved what Jung called psychological independence. Your sense of self no longer depends on their validation or approval.
Oh yeah.
Jung understood that healing isn't just about escaping abuse. It's about integrating the lessons into a more complete version of yourself. What I call post-narcissistic growth involves several key psychological developments. First, you develop what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposites in creative tension. You can be both compassionate and boundaried, both open and protected,
Both angry
trusting
and loving
discerning.
at the same
This isn't contradiction, it's psychological maturity.
That's
Second, you learn to recognize what Jung termed the narcissistic constellation in others. You can spot the signs early, the excessive charm, the pity stories, the boundary testing, the intermittent reinforcement.
Yep.
Your empathy becomes a radar system for authenticity rather than a beacon for predators.
Yep.
Third, you develop what I call conscious empathy. Instead of automatically absorbing everyone's emotions, you choose when to attune to others and when to maintain your own energetic
When to tell them to
boundaries.
fuck off.
Jung called this the art of conscious relationship. The relationship patterns that emerge in stage 4 are completely different. You attract people who appreciate your depth without exploiting it, who can meet your emotional intensity without being overwhelmed by it, who respect your boundaries because they have healthy ones too. Jung believed that individual transformation creates collective change. When empaths complete this 4-stage journey, they model a different way of being for others. What I call the healed empath effect ripples out in powerful ways. You become living proof that sensitive people don't have to be victims.
Yep.
You show others that empathy can coexist with strength,
Yep.
that compassion doesn't require self-sacrifice,
Fuck yeah.
that healing is possible even after the worst psychological abuse.
Yep.
Other empaths look at your transformation and think, if they can do it, maybe I can too.
I hope so.
You become what Jung called a wounded healer, someone who transforms their pain into wisdom and
Let's do
uses
it.
that wisdom to help others heal.
Fuck yes.
But perhaps most importantly, your transformation changes the narcissistic supply chain. Every empath who completes this journey is one less source of energy for predators.
Yep.
Every boundary you set makes it slightly harder for narcissists to find easy targets. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." When empaths claim this privilege, they don't just save themselves, they contribute to the healing of the collective shadow. Jung understood that narcissistic abuse isn't random. It serves a psychological function for both parties. The narcissist gets to avoid their own shadow by projecting it onto the empath. The empath gets to avoid their own power by staying in victim consciousness. But here's the profound truth Jung discovered. The abuse relationship is a distorted mirror of individuation. Both people are trying to become whole, but they're doing it through each other instead of through their own inner work. The narcissist seeks wholeness by consuming others' life force. The empath seeks wholeness by healing others' wounds. Both approaches fail because wholeness can only come from within. When the empath completes the 4-stage journey, they break this unconscious contract. They stop trying to heal others and focus on healing themselves. They stop giving their power away and start reclaiming their sovereignty. This is what Jung meant by individuation, becoming undivided within yourself. Not perfect, but complete. Not without wounds, but not defined by them.
Yes.
Not without empathy, but not enslaved by it. Jung believed that empaths serve an evolutionary function in human consciousness. You're not just sensitive people. You're what I call consciousness accelerators. Your ability to feel deeply, perceive authentically, and love unconditionally pushes the species toward greater emotional intelligence and spiritual awareness. But this gift comes with great responsibility. You must learn to use your empathy consciously, not just reactively. You must develop the discernment to know when your sensitivity is serving evolution and when it's enabling dysfunction. The 4-stage journey isn't just personal healing,
Yeah,
it's
that's good. That is
preparation for
really
your
good.
larger purpose. Jung wrote, "Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." Awakened empaths become agents of collective transformation. You're here to model what healthy empathy looks like, to show that sensitivity is strength, not weakness, to
Absolutely.
demonstrate that love can have boundaries, that compassion can have limits,
You can tell people to
that
fuck
giving
off
can be
in
conscious
the name of love.
rather than
Fuck
compulsive.
yes.
So here's what I want you to understand. If you're an empath who has experienced narcissistic abuse, you're not broken. You're not too sensitive. You're not fundamentally flawed. You're a highly evolved consciousness having a very human experience of learning to protect your gifts. The 4 stages aren't punishment, they're preparation. Each stage teaches you something essential about yourself, about others, about the nature of healthy relationship. Stage 1 teaches you about your magnetism. Stage 2 teaches you about your boundaries. Stage 3 teaches you about your strength. Stage 4 teaches you about your sovereignty. Jung spent his entire career studying the process of becoming whole, and he found that it always requires facing the shadow, both your own and others. The narcissist was your teacher in this process, though neither of you understood it at the time. If you recognize yourself in these stages, know that you're exactly where you need to be. Trust the process. Trust your intuition. Trust that your empathy, properly developed, will become your greatest strength.
Yep.
Carl Jung discovered that empaths who survive narcissistic abuse go through 4 distinct stages. Stage 1, the light trap, where your gifts attract predators.
Wait a minute, did this replay?
Stage 2,
Did this
the
replay?
soul extraction, where they
Oh.
attempt to consume your essence. Stage 3, the dark night,
Is
where
sunrising
everything
or does
falls
it start
apart
over?
so it can be rebuilt correctly. Stage 4, the phoenix rebirth, where you become unbreakable.
Okay.
The narcissist taught you the most important lesson of your life, that your empathy is sacred and must be protected.
Alright, so I've
They
created
forced
this
you to
playlist
develop the very
because of this.
boundaries and discernment. Carl
so-
Jung documented
let's
why
have this
people
one
with what we
yesterday.
now call empathic abilities face a cruel psychological paradox. Their greatest gift becomes the source of their deepest pain. He discovered that
stuff.
empathic individuals unconsciously attract people who project their shadow onto them. People who resent the
Wisdom is
empath's
shown by
emotional
what
freedom
results from it.
because
I'm
it
going to
reminds
listen
them
to
of their
this
own emotional numbness.
and have it
Jung
concur
found
with
that the
my
more
life
authentic and
experience.
radiant someone
It's
with
pretty
highly
freaking
developed
awesome.
feeling function becomes, the
And
more
it's
they
gonna be very
threaten
helpful.
others' psychological defenses. What Jung called shadow projection creates a pattern where empaths are simultaneously sought after and secretly despised for possessing what others have lost or buried within themselves.
I've figured that one out.
Today,
I got-
I'll reveal
I don't
Jung's
understand why
most disturbing
abuse runs
discovery
in
about
cycles, and
empathic
this is part of
psychology,
why.
and why he
I've
believed
figured
this
out that
pattern
something breaks
either
in other people
destroys
that did not
sensitive
break in me.
individuals completely or transforms them into exactly what humanity needs for its emotional evolution.
Or they never had what
The
I had.
pattern that
and what I
revealed
had is
Jung's
greater
most
than the
chilling
abuse.
insight
I don't know. I
emerged
just can't
from
understand why
multiple
people
cases he observed in
repeat the
his clinical
cycle.
practice.
That is not
Individuals
even,
with
not even
extraordinary
remotely
empathic
inclined to
abilities
repeat the cycle.
who seem to magnetize people that would eventually turn against them with inexplicable hostility. Jung consistently documented what I call luminous emotional authenticity in these patients. They could sense others' pain instantly, respond with genuine compassion, and create safe spaces where people felt truly understood for the first time in their lives. Yet every close relationship followed the same devastating pattern. Jung's observations revealed these individuals draw others to them like moths to flame, yet these same people develop unconscious resentment toward the very qualities that initially attracted them. It is as if their light exposes shadows others cannot bear to acknowledge. People would confess their deepest secrets to them, find healing in their presence, and experience profound emotional relief. Then, without warning, they would begin to criticize them, undermine their confidence, and eventually abandon them entirely, often blaming them for being too intense or too much. Jung realized he wasn't observing simple relationship dysfunction. He was witnessing what happens when unconscious people encounter someone who has maintained connection to their authentic feeling function. The pattern Jung documented would become one of his most important insights into human psychology. Authentic emotional expression triggers unconscious shame in those who have betrayed their own emotional truth. If you've ever been criticized for being too emotional or too intense, write this in the comments. My empathy is not too much. Others are too numb. Jung's observations of this phenomenon led him to identify what modern psychology now recognizes as psychological mirroring theory. When individuals with highly developed feeling function interact with emotionally disconnected people, they unconsciously reflect back the emotional authenticity those people have abandoned. Jung's research revealed that most people disconnect from their authentic emotions early in life as a survival mechanism. They learn to suppress sensitivity, hide vulnerability, and operate from false personas that gain social acceptance but cost them their emotional aliveness. What I call the authenticity wound shows how people who have cut themselves off from genuine feeling develop unconscious hostility toward those who haven't. The empath's natural emotional expression becomes a painful reminder of what they've lost. Jung observed that what we now call empaths fall into what I term the mirror trap. Their authentic presence automatically triggers others' repressed emotions and buried pain. This creates intense discomfort in people who have built their entire identity around emotional numbness. The person caught in this dynamic experiences what I call projection amplification. They unconsciously blame the empath for making them feel emotions they've spent years avoiding. The empath becomes responsible for pain that existed long before they entered the picture. Jung noted something even more disturbing. People often seek out those with empathic gifts, specifically because their unconscious recognizes what they've lost. They're drawn to the emotional aliveness they observe, yet simultaneously resent it because it exposes their own emotional death. This creates what Jung identified as the fundamental psychological paradox affecting sensitive individuals. Jung's most disturbing discovery about empaths was how they become targets for what he extensively documented as shadow projection, where people unconsciously transfer their own rejected qualities onto the empath, then attack them for possessing these very traits. Through his analytical work, Jung found that people who resent empaths are actually resenting parts of themselves they've disowned. The empath's emotional sensitivity reminds them of their own buried sensitivity. The empath's authenticity exposes their own falsehood. What makes this particularly cruel is that empaths often possess the exact qualities these people once had, but learned to suppress. Jung observed, the individual attacks in the empath what they have killed within themselves.
That makes so much sense. Trisha and me met like on a Christian forum. Like I was working at First Data Corporation in Tulsa, and my apartment was right across the street from the place. So I didn't have a long drive to work. I had 5 minutes. I was trying to be on time to work because I didn't have to leave early for traffic or nothing. But anyways, one day I was aware of Rebecca St. James concert coming, and on a whim, I called into work and went to the concert instead. Like it was like literally I was supposed to be at work in like 15 minutes. I was all set to go, and I didn't remember the concert. I decided to call in and go to the concert, which at First Data you had an attendance policy. You just, if you're within that policy, that's fine. Like calling in was not a big deal. Like I wasn't letting anybody down. Like it's built in. Like that's my right. Someone else can call in too. So it's kind of nice. Like it's not about guilt. It's not like you don't have to make excuses or anything. If you're on the verge of being fired, you might be trying to make excuses to try to figure out how you're going to make a case for an exception. But pretty much, anyway. So I called in. It wasn't a big deal. I'm just saying, like last minute, like I'm gonna go to this concert, and I bought my ticket and went in by myself, and it was Rebecca St. James. And that particular time, she had her worship album out. And that was like the most moving worship experience I'd ever had in that concert. I was just there by myself. And so afterwards, I was following up on the forums and stuff. And I had a website I was starting called Christ for Sale. And I've always opposed the hypocrisy and bullshit in the church. And I was just trying to, but I used to believe you could just steer people like it was just I was naive enough to think there was just some bad actors and that it could actually be saved, but that the church as a whole was legit or whatever, right? So I was a sincere Christian, and that forum on Rebecca St. James' website is where I met Trisha. Not a dating app. This is like most people at that time were not meeting people online. It was meeting someone online was still kind of a crazy thing. But we met at that forum, and it was a Christian faith that was what got us talking, and we went from there. And it was the confidence I had in my faith being sincere. I didn't understand. I mean, my stepmom was a hypocrite, so I thought I understood her, but she was a cruel, evil bitch, right? And never faked anything that was remotely genuine. Like she played church, but she never I never saw her like faking any kind of true knowledge of scripture or principles or stuff, just literally just went to church, pretended to be a good person there. So fast forward, and I completely fell hook, line, and sinker for somebody that seemed to be passionate about proper Christian living and stuff like that. Unfortunately, Trisha grew up with hypocrites and watching her parents be fake pastors, watching and growing up where you go to church, you'd be all nice and all that, you collect all your money and everything, and then you go after church and spend the whole time gossiping very disgustingly about all the people that attended the church. They literally didn't give a shit about any of them. They just despised all of them. And that was my introduction. So Trisha's dad helped me make the decision to get married, but it turned out the thing I fell for is something he regurgitated time and time again, using that song, basically, it's just stupid. Anyways, I mean, he wins you over. He has his charm and stuff. So I'm just like, wow, I met this woman that, and then her family's great too. And, here I am, the piece of shit family, thinking, oh, this is cool. And so it wasn't just falling for one person. It was falling for the entire family, her entire family being in on the hypocrite act. And I was not prepared for a family to act like hypocrite, genuine Christians. I was dealing with hypocrisy that was basically pretend to be a normal, sane person in public, and you're abusive, fucking toxic, evil bitch behind the scenes, or a worthless coward behind the scenes for my dad, or whatever the case. I had no introduction to people actually being pastors and fully, I didn't know anybody that actually pursued, my introduction was you could just go play nice and play church. You didn't actually have to apply yourself to benefit from being a Christian hypocrite. And then here I was, no, the next level is the people that are being pastors, and they go all in, but it's still hypocrisy, and they become the absolute worst. And then, of course, they got a free pass with their title from a lot of people, so those stupid people in religion, you can't get them to hold anybody accountable, right? But anyways, fast forward to Trisha, and exactly, the only reason I fell for her is because she, at one point, was genuine and sincere herself, but that was already gone before we met. But she knew how to play into it. She was attracted to it. I rekindled something in her that she wanted at one point, that she had already given up on. And I guess, once you count the cost and it's no longer worth being legit and you switch to game playing, I don't think you can make the sacrifice to go back to being authentic. There's a price to pay for being authentic. And it's easier to pay the price if you've never have the reward to give up first. And I've never known anybody that's been benefiting from hypocrisy or narcissism or anything else that has been willing to pay the price to go back to being genuine. And listening to this stuff here, it may not even be possible for them to recover. But yes, people hate me because I'm empathetic. People hate me because I'm genuine and literally conspire against me. And then now our world is so warped that MAGA is, your Trishas just out in the public, MAGA is these people that gave up on their authentic selves now getting together to play a different game that makes them feel good, makes them feel like they're winning. And they literally have no soul left to save, no soul left to reason with, nothing to guide them to repentance. And that is why we see that Jesus didn't even try. He just says, I will tell you to depart from me. I never knew you. When you get to the gospel of Jesus Christ, it really is great news. All you have to do to inherit eternal life, to have peace with God and confidence through every situation, is to treat your neighbor the way you want to be treated in all times. But the problem is, your fellow Americans are going to make you pay for doing that. It's going to make a price for that. You're supposed to count that cost before you make a decision for Jesus, because it's not too much to pay up front. But how hardly shall the rich enter the kingdom of heaven. Once you reap the rewards of evil, you have to sacrifice all of those. When you've stolen, you have to repay twice what you've stolen. And that is the part that Americans will not do. It's a one-way street in America. And once you compromise to get your privilege in America, you can never be reasoned with. You can never be restored to genuine faith in Jesus and genuine love for your neighbors ever again. This land is evil. It's a lie. And people are playing that lie because they literally have no idea what else they could possibly live for if they can't get that American dream. So they live this American nightmare for fear that they will have no reason to live if they give it up. And yet the life they live here in this American bullshit is no life worth living anyways. And they're too fucking blind and stupid and too far gone to wake up. And collectively, as a society, our younger generations were starting to wake up because our older generations were too busy stealing to pay attention to the trends. But once people caught on to it, we had a war on woke, and immediately all that stuff was reversed. Because that was the new game, and these people that have sold their souls to this bullshit no longer have any individual thought, any individual motivation. You can steer the whole ship. Trump caught on to that, and Trump has no compassion for anybody. Trump is a very disgusting, evil person that had no qualms cashing in on the stupidity of the average American sellout. And that's what we have today. That's why Trump is a scapegoat. America is fucked up and failing because Americans are fucked up and failures. That's it. As I'm not making this up. It's not political. That's why there's no political solution. Vote for Democrats all the fuck you want to. You still got American people voting. You're still going to get bullshit, not progress. All right.
Resentment is not toward the empath. It is toward their own abandoned emotional truth. This creates what I call the innocence punishment dynamic. People who have lost their emotional innocence through trauma or social conditioning unconsciously punish those who have managed to preserve theirs. Comment below if you've attracted people who later turned against you for no clear reason. I recognize shadow projection when I see it. Jung documented how this manifests in subtle but devastating ways. People will criticize empaths for being too sensitive when they themselves wish they could feel deeply again. They'll mock empathic responses as naive when they've simply become cynical to protect themselves from pain. The most insidious aspect is that these attacks often come disguised as concern or advice. You need to toughen up. The world will eat you alive. You're too trusting. These statements reveal the speaker's own emotional wounds while attempting to dim the empath's light. Jung realized this wasn't conscious malice. It was unconscious self-hatred being projected outward onto someone who represented what they could no longer access within themselves. Through his analytical work with empaths and their relationships, Jung identified 4 distinct patterns of how people unconsciously attack empathic individuals for their authentic emotional expression. Type 1. The emotional critic. Jung documented people who specifically target empaths' emotional responses. These individuals have learned to suppress their own feelings so completely that witnessing authentic emotion triggers unconscious shame about their own emotional deadness. What I call feeling police are people who constantly tell empaths their emotions are wrong, excessive, or inappropriate. They've internalized the message that emotions are weakness and project this belief onto empaths. Type 2. The authenticity attacker. These individuals unconsciously resent empaths for being genuine because they've built their entire identity around false personas. Jung observed how people who live behind masks feel threatened by those who don't need masks to survive. What I term the performance police criticize empaths for being too real or inappropriate when they simply haven't learned to hide their authentic selves behind social facades. If you've ever dimmed your authentic self to make others comfortable, comment, "I will no longer shrink to fit their emotional limitations." Type 3. The vulnerability violator. Jung noted people who specifically target empaths' openness and trust. These individuals have been hurt so badly that they've closed their hearts completely, and they unconsciously punish empaths for maintaining emotional availability. What I call the trust destroyers are people who take advantage of empathic openness, then blame empaths for being too trusting rather than acknowledging their own betrayal of that trust. Type 4. The light dimmer. The most dangerous type Jung encountered were people who systematically work to diminish empaths' confidence in their own gifts. They've disconnected from their own inner light so completely that others' radiance becomes unbearable. What I term the brightness reducers use subtle psychological manipulation to convince empaths that their natural empathy is a problem to be fixed rather than a gift to be honored. Comment if you've realized that others' resentment of your sensitivity reveals their own wounds. Their attacks on my light expose their inner darkness. Understanding your specific pattern is crucial because each type requires different strategies for what Jung called the protection of authentic self. Jung identified 3 specific dangers that made this psychological dynamic a serious threat to both individual empaths and collective emotional evolution. Danger 1: the authenticity erosion. Jung observed that constant exposure to resentment and criticism causes many empaths to begin doubting their own emotional reality. They start suppressing their natural responses to fit in with people who can't tolerate authentic emotion. He wrote, "The empath who abandons their authenticity to gain acceptance loses the very quality that made them valuable. They become another emotionally dead person in a world that desperately needs emotional aliveness." This creates what Jung called the dimming epidemic. Empaths learning to hide their light to avoid triggering others' unconscious hostility. Danger 2: psychological self-betrayal. Jung documented how empaths often internalize the criticism they receive, beginning to see their empathy as a flaw rather than a gift. They start believing they're too much or too sensitive, instead of recognizing that others are often too little and too numb. The greatest tragedy occurs when the empath begins attacking their own emotional nature with the same violence others have directed toward them. They become their own emotional assassin. Danger 3: collective emotional stagnation. Most dangerously, Jung found that when empaths learn to suppress their authenticity, humanity loses its emotional pioneers, the individuals capable of modeling what healthy emotional expression looks like. Jung called this emotional evolution arrest, when the people most capable of advancing collective emotional intelligence are forced into hiding to protect themselves from unconscious attacks. He wrote, "The suppression of empathic individuals represents humanity's unconscious rejection of its own emotional potential. We attack in others what we most need to reclaim within ourselves." This is why Jung considered the protection and development of empathic individuals essential for human psychological advancement. Jung developed what I call the authentic self-preservation protocol, a systematic approach to maintaining empathic gifts while protecting against unconscious projection from others. If you found people who celebrate rather than criticize your empathic gifts, write, "I found my tribe, those who appreciate authentic feeling." Phase 1: recognition and validation. Jung taught individuals with empathic gifts to first recognize that the resentment they face isn't personal. It's shadow projection from people who have lost connection to their own feeling function. Jung understood that hatred directed toward their authenticity is actually self-hatred being projected outward.
This is partly why I am an ally to the trans community, and I like trans people, is trans people are empathic, they are authentic people trying to be their authentic selves. And honestly, I have a theory that a lot of gender dysphoria is actually the result of our society with these false man cards and bullshit, this toxic masculinity that these cowards have to latch onto to try to pose as men, is causing confusion in real people, real authentic people, because they make you think that a man won't have empathy, and that's bullshit. And so I don't think the trouble is gender so much as it is not gender in itself, but gender as a construct has warped it into a point that real empaths, real authentic people struggle to identify with the bullshit genders and stuff that society has created. Anyways, it's not my place. I don't have gender dysphoria. It's not my place to like project that theory onto people with gender dysphoria and say, no, you should not transition this or that. It's my place to appreciate that there's still authentic people in the world and to respect them and honor them as they find their own peace and comfort. But yes, if you want to find consistently a place with authentic, legit, good people that an empath can relate to, it's going to be your trans community. It's going to be your effeminate gay men that are going to probably come out later as trans and they don't even know it yet. Not people that are putting on this exaggerated show of flamboyance, but your authentic gays that are authentically feminine. When they're being their authentic self and that's who they are, though, there's some good people. I'm not talking, their sexuality, all that doesn't matter. Those are good, legit people, and that's why your average American has to hate them. That's why they have to group hate them. You're literally, in America, if you're thriving in America, you have sold out. You have sold your soul. You hate empaths because they are showing you that you didn't have to give up. You know, before listening to this from Carl Jung, I've already figured that out about my family. That literally, I am showing you don't have to sell out to make it. You just sold out because you were too weak to be yourself. And that's why they're hating me. That's why they're stacking the deck. That's why they're lying against me, slandering me. And then we have a corrupt system that just will never check itself. If anything, you would think they get to screw over enough people that they'd go ahead and leave me alone. But that's not the way they see it. They see it as a game. If I survive without paying ransom to a lawyer, they've lost the game. They're never satisfied. That's why a decade later, I still can't get help for my kids. This whole area is full of a bunch of people that are nothing but fakes. A bunch of people that sold out, and now they hate themselves for selling out, and they have to express that hatred towards people that haven't sold out. And that's why they have to vote for Trump to fuck everybody over instead of Harris to possibly at least pretend that she's going to try to make stuff better for the American people. Trump is America, plain and simple. I don't just say this to try to get under people's skin. I say it because it's a fact. All right, back to the broadcast.
Empathic individual is not the problem. They are the mirror reflecting someone else's inner wound. Technique. Jung instructed empaths to interpret criticism and hostility as information about the critic's psychological state rather than accurate feedback about their own behavior. Phase 2. Boundary crystallization. Jung discovered that those with empathic abilities need what I call energetic boundaries, the ability to maintain their authentic expression while protecting themselves from others' unconscious projections. Comment below if you're ready to protect your empathic nature while serving those who can receive it. I choose conscious empathy over unconscious absorption. This involves learning to distinguish between genuine feedback that serves individuation and projection-based attacks designed to dim their authentic self-expression. Jung called this developing psychological discernment. If you've learned to distinguish between genuine feedback and projection-based attacks, comment, I know the difference between truth and shadow. Phase 3. Selective engagement. The final phase involves what Jung called conscious relationship choices, the ability to connect deeply with people who appreciate authenticity while maintaining distance from those who resent it. Jung's approach emphasized that empathic individuals serve no one by dimming their feeling function to accommodate those who prefer emotional numbness. Their authentic expression is medicine for those ready to heal and mirror for those ready to see. This requires developing what I call vibrational matching, attracting people who resonate with authenticity rather than those who fear it. Jung's insights extended beyond clinical work to to include historical figures who successfully maintained their empathic nature despite facing resentment for their emotional authenticity. The case of Saint Francis of Assisi, successful integration. Jung studied how Francis maintained radical empathy and emotional openness despite criticism from religious authorities who preferred emotional suppression. Francis demonstrated what I call authentic integration. Francis faced constant criticism for being too emotional and too compassionate, yet he never dimmed his empathic response to suffering. His authentic spiritual expression threatened those who had made religion into an intellectual exercise devoid of genuine feeling. Jung noted that Francis's success came from recognizing that criticism of his empathy revealed the spiritual poverty of his critics rather than flaws in his own nature. The case of Vincent van Gogh. Unprotected sensitivity. Jung observed how Van Gogh's extraordinary empathic perception created incredible art, but also made him vulnerable to others' unconscious resentment of his emotional intensity. Van Gogh's letters reveal how people consistently criticized him for being too much, too emotional, too intense, too sensitive. Unlike Francis, Van Gogh internalized these criticisms and began attacking his own empathic nature. Jung's analysis showed that Van Gogh possessed the empathic vision necessary for genius, but lacked the psychological protection required to preserve it. His tragedy was not his sensitivity, but his belief that others' inability to tolerate it meant something was wrong with him. Jung's own light protection journey. Most significantly, Jung documented his own experience as an individual with empathic abilities, navigating professional environments that often resented emotional depth and psychological insight. Jung learned that his ability to see psychological truth threatened those who preferred psychological falsehood. His choice was to dim his perception, to gain acceptance, or maintain it, and accept potential isolation from those who fear authentic seeing. Jung's breakthrough came when he realized that protecting his empathic gifts served not just his own individuation, but the advancement of psychological understanding itself. Jung emphasized that empaths need what he called vibrational sanctuary, relationships with others who appreciate rather than resent authentic emotional expression. Jung wrote, "The empath cannot thrive in emotional isolation, yet they cannot survive in relationships with those who attack their authenticity. They must create conscious community with others who celebrate rather than suppress emotional aliveness." Type 1. Fellow empathic individuals. Jung identified the importance of connecting with others who share empathic gifts. These relationships are characterized by mutual recognition, emotional safety, and appreciation for sensitivity rather than criticism of it. These connections often form quickly because both parties feel relief at finding someone who doesn't try to dim their light or criticize their emotional responses. Type 2. Emotionally evolved non-empaths.
How do I explain
Jung
to Nelly?
observed that some people,
I don't know what happened
while
there. I
not
didn't know how I
naturally
would
empathic,
actually trust
have
anybody.
done enough
Yeah.
psychological
Yeah.
work to appreciate and protect empathic individuals. They recognize empathy as a gift rather than a flaw. These individuals often serve as bridges between the empathic person and the broader world, helping to create safer spaces for authentic expression. Type 3. Conscious light. Appreciators. Jung identified people who, regardless of their own empathic abilities, consciously choose to support and protect authentic emotional expression in others. They understand that empathic individuals serve an important function in collective emotional evolution. Recognition signals. Jung developed specific indicators for identifying safe relationships. They ask about your emotional experiences with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. They appreciate your empathic insights rather than criticizing your sensitivity. They protect your emotional energy rather than draining it. They encourage your authentic expression rather than asking you to dim it. They recognize your empathy as a strength rather than treating it as a weakness. Community building process. Jung taught empaths to gradually reveal their authentic nature while observing how others respond. Begin with small expressions of empathic insight. Notice whether people appreciate or resent your emotional awareness. Assess whether they protect or violate your emotional boundaries. Gradually increase authenticity with those who demonstrate appreciation. Create distance from those who consistently attack your empathic nature. Jung emphasized, the goal is not to hide your light, but to share it with those who can appreciate its beauty rather than resent its brightness. Jung viewed successful empath development as essential not just for individual well-being, but for collective emotional advancement toward more authentic human connection. Jung wrote, "The empath who successfully integrates their gifts while protecting their authenticity becomes a beacon for others seeking to reconnect with their own emotional truth. They prove that sensitivity and strength can coexist." The 4 stages of light integration.
Absolutely.
Stage 1, recognition without suppression.
Like,
The first
I'm not trying to be
transformation
this
occurs
person.
when
This is who I
empaths
am.
learn
Like,
to
I'm,
recognize resentment directed toward them as projection rather than accurate
this is helping
feedback.
me learn what.
Jung called this
This is helping
projection
me
immunity.
not only understand myself
Jung
better, but
observed,
also
wisdom
understand
begins
why
when the
other
empath
people don't
stops
get
believing
me.
that others' inability to tolerate
as
their
well as
light
why I
means
do
they should
attack
dim
like
it.
the worst of the
The
worst.
problem lies not in being too
as far as
much,
toxic
but in
people
others
go.
becoming too little. Stage 2, boundary development without hardening. The second stage involves creating energetic protection while maintaining emotional openness. Jung called this selective permeability, the ability to remain empathic while protecting against projection. He noted, the integrated empath learns to distinguish between authentic emotional connection and psychological attack disguised as relationship. They remain open to love while becoming immune to hatred. Stage 3, community creation without compromise. The third transformation happens when empaths stop trying to gain acceptance from those who resent authenticity and instead focus on building relationships with those who appreciate it. Jung wrote, the empath's evolution requires releasing the need to be understood by everyone and focusing on being truly known by the right people. Quality of connection matters more than quantity of acceptance.
Oh yeah, of course.
Stage 4, service without sacrifice. The final stage involves what Jung called authentic service, using empathic gifts to help others while maintaining strong boundaries against those who would exploit or resent these abilities. Jung observed, the fully integrated empath serves from overflow rather than depletion. They give their gifts to those who can receive them without demanding acceptance from those who cannot. The integration creates cultural healing. Jung believed that protected empaths serve a vital evolutionary function. They model what healthy emotional expression looks like while maintaining their ability to help others reconnect with their own buried authenticity. Jung wrote, the empath who successfully preserves their light in a world that often prefers darkness becomes a living reminder that emotional death is not inevitable. They carry the flame that others can use to reignite their own emotional aliveness. Jung documented specific dangers that can derail empaths' journey toward authentic self-preservation and conscious community building. Pitfall 1, the revenge trap. Jung observed that some empaths, upon recognizing how they've been treated, develop resentment toward those who attack their authenticity. They begin attacking others' emotional numbness the way others attack their emotional aliveness. He warned, the empath who responds to unconscious attack with conscious attack has learned the wrong lesson. Understanding projection does not justify projecting in return. Jung noted that empaths who fall into this trap often become the very thing they once suffered from, people who attack others for their psychological differences. Pitfall 2, the superiority complex. Jung documented cases where empaths used their understanding of unconscious dynamics to feel superior to those who resent their authenticity. They developed what he called enlightened arrogance. Jung wrote, the empath who believes their emotional aliveness makes them better than others has missed the point entirely. Their gift is meant to serve healing, not to create hierarchy. Pitfall 3. The isolation justification. Jung observed that some empaths use their understanding of projection to justify complete withdrawal from challenging relationships. They convinced themselves that anyone who couldn't appreciate their gifts wasn't worth engaging. He noted, true integration requires the empath to maintain their authenticity while remaining compassionately available to those ready to receive their gifts. Isolation serves no one. Pitfall 4. The light dimming. Most dangerously, Jung found that some empaths, despite understanding the dynamics, still chose to suppress their authenticity to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
They intellectually understood projection, but emotionally remained afraid of others' resentment. Jung emphasized,
That's horrible.
understanding why others attack your light does not eliminate the pain of being attacked. The empath must develop genuine inner strength, not just intellectual insight. The integration maintenance. Jung developed ongoing practices for maintaining authentic expression while protecting against projection. Regular assessment of which relationships support versus drain your empathic gifts. Conscious choice about when to engage empathically and when to maintain protective boundaries. Connection with others who share similar experiences and challenges. Recognition that some people may never be able to appreciate authentic emotion. Focus on serving those who can receive your gifts rather than trying to convert those who resent them. Jung wrote, "The authentic empath does not try to force their light on everyone, but ensures their light continues burning for those who need its warmth." Jung understood empathic
I like
psychology
that stuff.
within
It
the
is
context
diving
of
into some
collective
pitfalls.
emotional evolution.
Obviously, I'm knocking on the
Viewing
door
authentic
of
empathic
some of those
individuals
pitfalls if I
as
haven't
essential
already
for
fully
humanity's
engaged.
advancement
I'm
toward
definitely
more
knocking on the door,
genuine
though.
emotional expression.
I don't feel
Jung
like
believed that individuals who maintain their
any of that
feeling
fits like a
function
glove, but
despite
it's
unconscious
definitely
attack
food for thought.
serve as evidence that emotional aliveness
Good heads
is
up.
possible even in an emotionally disconnected world. They are emotional pioneers, showing others the path back to their own hearts. The historical pattern. Jung observed that throughout history, empathic individuals have served as bridges between humanity's emotional past and its emotional future. They preserve emotional wisdom during times of collective numbness and model emotional healing when others are ready to receive it. Jung noted that what appears in the empathic individual as personal emotional authenticity later manifests in the collective as cultural emotional evolution. They serve as keepers of the flame during humanity's dark emotional ages.
Like the
Modern
present one.
manifestations. Jung believed that in the modern era, what we now call empaths might be sensing and responding to collective emotional trauma that needs conscious processing, buried authentic feeling that requires expression for collective healing, the cost of emotional suppression on individual and social well-being, possibilities for more genuine human connection beyond surface-level interaction, the need for emotional intelligence in leadership and decision-making. Jung's insight. The empathic individual feels collectively what others feel individually, but suppress. Their emotional responses often reflect what the entire culture needs to process consciously. The service through authenticity, Jung's crucial insight, was that those with empathic gifts serve others best, not by dimming their feeling function to make others comfortable, but by maintaining their authenticity to show others what emotional aliveness looks like. Jung understood that empathic individuals serve humanity not by becoming emotionally numb like everyone else, but by remaining emotionally alive despite everyone else. Their authenticity is medicine for a world suffering from what I call emotional evolution arrest. The ultimate integration. At the highest level of development, Jung observed, empaths learn to hold their gifts with both strength and compassion, maintaining their authenticity while understanding that others' resentment comes from pain rather than malice. What I call luminous compassion represents the ability to shine their light fully while having empathy for those who cannot yet tolerate that brightness. Remember Jung's pattern from his clinical practice. individuals whose empathic abilities seem to magnetize people who would eventually turn against them with inexplicable hostility. After working with Jung's integration method, this relationship pattern could be completely transformed. These individuals learn to recognize resentment directed toward their authenticity as information about others' psychological wounds, rather than evidence that something was wrong with their feeling function. They found their tribe, people who celebrated rather than attacked their empathic gifts. They began using their abilities to serve those who could receive them, rather than trying to gain acceptance from those who resented them. Most importantly, they stopped dimming their emotional authenticity
in small-town USA
to accommodate others' preference for emotional numbness.
Everybody in small-town USA is
revealed that
sellouts.
these patients learned their empathic nature
You have
was not
to.
a flaw to be corrected,
The American
but a
church is
gift
full of
to be
such
protected.
cruel hypocrites.
They discovered that the problem was never their
That
emotional
small-town America
aliveness.
requires
It
that
was
you become a
others' emotional
douchebag
disconnection
to fit in.
and their unconscious resentment of what they had lost within themselves. This represents Jung's most important discovery about empathic psychology. Those who resent your authenticity are usually mourning their own abandoned feeling function. Their hostility toward your emotional aliveness reveals their grief over their own suppressed emotional truth. Your empathic nature isn't too much for this world. This world has simply become too disconnected from its own emotional potential. You're not broken because others can't tolerate your feeling function. They're wounded because they've learned to tolerate emotional numbness. The question isn't whether people will resent your authenticity. The question is whether you'll protect your feeling function while having compassion for those who have lost theirs. Jung's integration method offers a path from unconscious victimhood to conscious service. From hiding your gifts
What an angle.
to sharing them wisely.
Compassion for
From
yes,
suppressing
yes.
your authenticity
I would hate to be
letting it
an
shine for
emotionalist
those who need its
douchebag,
warmth.
being
You were
greedy
born to be empathically
to my own
alive,
doom,
not
like
to dim
Americans are
yourself for
today.
those
So
who
yeah,
prefer emotional
that is something
disconnection,
to have.
but to model emotional authenticity
To
for those
have
ready to
compassion for
reclaim
if you
their
get the
own
right
buried
perspective.
feeling function. The world needs your light, but it needs it burning brightly, rather than hidden under the bushel of others' unconscious projection. Your empathy isn't your weakness. Others' inability to tolerate authentic emotion is their unhealed wound projected onto your strength. Learn Jung's integration principles, and you become exactly what he believed empathic individuals were meant to be. Bridges between humanity's emotional past and its emotional future. Keepers of authentic feeling in a world that has forgotten how to feel. Healers who maintain their own wholeness while helping others remember theirs. Jung's most important discovery wasn't that people resent empaths' authenticity, it's that this resentment reveals humanity's unconscious grief over its own lost emotional truth. Your light doesn't need to dim. Their capacity to appreciate authenticity needs to brighten. You are not too much for anyone. The right people will celebrate your empathic gifts, while the wrong people reveal themselves through their resentment of what they can no longer access within themselves. If you recognize yourself in Jung's description of an empath who attracts unconscious resentment, you're part of a rare group that Jung believed essential for humanity's emotional evolution. Share in the comments which type of light resentment you've experienced. Your journey toward authentic self-preservation connects with others walking the same path. Subscribe for more insights into Jung's discoveries about empathic psychology and emotional authenticity. If you're ready to explore more of Jung's insights about psychological dynamics that empaths face, check out my video on The Day the Empath Snaps, Carl Jung's most terrifying case, where I reveal how empaths transform from emotional absorbers into psychologically sovereign beings who can no longer be manipulated or broken by others. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.
I know I'm at a loss at all the people that think calling me the Geico caveman is going to accomplish anything. Like, really? Really? Is that where we're at, America? The little childish insults is enough to control the average American? So much so that it's worth doing in a comment on a video? But this this content has me wondering, like, oh, okay, there's even more going on behind the scenes of that. Whoops.
Carl Jung revealed that empaths can find their true self by following a psychological map that most people never discover. Not through meditation, not through therapy, not even through years of spiritual seeking. Jung found that empaths possess a unique psychological advantage for individuation, but only if they understand the one shadow pattern that's been keeping them lost in everyone else's emotional world. Picture this moment. You're sitting alone after absorbing someone's heavy emotions all day. A friend's anxiety, a co-worker's frustration, your family's unspoken tension. You feel drained, confused about what's actually yours. You can sense everyone else's inner world with startling clarity, but when you try to connect with your own authentic self, there's just emptiness. Jung spent decades studying what he called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are beneath all the masks and projections. But he discovered that empaths face a unique challenge. Your greatest gift becomes your greatest obstacle to self-discovery. And once you understand Jung's map, you'll never lose yourself in other people's emotions again. This isn't another spiritual bypass or toxic positivity approach. It's a psychological roadmap that reveals the deepest truths about empathic consciousness. And by the end of this journey, you'll not only reclaim your authentic self, but you'll understand how to use your sensitivity as a superpower rather than a burden. But here's what makes Jung's discovery so disturbing for empaths. Your ability to feel everyone else's emotions isn't just a gift. It's been unconsciously programming you to abandon your own authentic self. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Your empathic nature creates what I call emotional fusion, a psychological state where your boundaries become so permeable that you literally lose track of where you end and others begin. You've been absorbing not just emotions, but entire identity fragments from every person you encounter. Jung understood that empaths face a unique version of what he called the persona problem. While most people wear masks to hide their true selves from others, you've been wearing masks to hide your true self from yourself. Every time you prioritize someone else's emotional needs over your own inner voice, you strengthen the false persona and weaken your connection to what Jung called the self.
Oh, God.
The real
That
tragedy
makes so much sense.
isn't that you feel too much.
Holy shit.
It's that you've been taught to believe that feeling everything makes you more spiritual, more evolved, more compassionate. But Jung discovered something that will shatter this illusion. True compassion can only flow from an integrated self, not from a fragmented empath who's lost in other people's emotional chaos. Jung's first insight about empathic individuation centers on what I call the empathic shadow, the parts of yourself you've rejected because they don't fit the sensitive healer identity. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Here's the shadow pattern most empaths refuse to face: your need to be needed. Deep in your unconscious lurks a part of you that secretly enjoys being the emotional savior, the one everyone turns to in crisis.
Yeah.
This shadow aspect manipulates through martyrdom, controls through caretaking, and maintains superiority through suffering. You've probably never acknowledged this, but there's a part of you that feels special because you can feel what others can't. A part that gets narcissistic supply from being the chosen one who absorbs everyone's pain. Jung would call this your wounded healer complex, where your identity becomes so tied to healing others that you unconsciously create situations where people need your emotional rescue. But here's where it gets darker. Your empathic shadow also contains your rage, years of suppressed anger at having your boundaries violated, your needs ignored, your authentic self buried under everyone else's emotional demands. You've been taught that anger isn't spiritual, so you've pushed it into the unconscious, where it festers and manifests as passive aggression, victim consciousness, and what Jung called emotional possession. Jung observed that the healthy man does not torture others. Generally, it is the tortured who turn into torturers. Your shadow contains the potential to use your empathic gifts as weapons. You can manipulate through guilt, control through emotional overwhelm, and punish through withdrawal of your healing presence. The most dangerous aspect of the empathic shadow is projection. You unconsciously cast your disowned anger onto others, seeing them as toxic or narcissistic, while failing to recognize these same patterns operating within yourself. You become what Jung called a shadow hunter, obsessively focused on identifying darkness in others while remaining blind to your own. If you've ever secretly enjoyed being the only one who truly understands someone's pain, comment, "I was their chosen healer." This shadow acknowledgement isn't about shame, it's about integration. Jung taught that the shadow, once conscious, becomes a source of authentic power rather than unconscious manipulation. Jung's second insight reveals how empaths become trapped in what I call the sensitive persona, a false identity built around being emotionally available to everyone except yourself. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Your persona as the empathic healer seems noble, but it's actually a
this is kind of makes sense. That is like exactly possibly
You've
what I
learned that
needed.
being
Not
sensitive
this
and selfless
particular video, but
earns you
just
love,
this
approval,
information
and
on
a sense of purpose. But this persona requires you to constantly monitor and manage other
I barely
people's
said a
emotional
new
states
high school
while
record.
neglecting your own. Jung discovered that the stronger your persona, the more your authentic self
I've never played all the
goes
way through
underground.
in one shot.
You begin
I'll
living what
probably
I
do that
call
today, but I did
empathic
not.
performance.
I set a new high score.
Constantly
But
scanning the room for
this
emotional
one-
disturbances, automatically adjusting your energy to soothe others, reflexively absorbing tension
All right.
without
Let me,
even realizing it. The terrible irony is that your
Hold
empathic
down with some
persona
expert.
actually disconnects you from genuine empathy. True empathy requires clear boundaries, knowing where you end and others begin. But your persona creates what Jung called emotional fusion, where you lose yourself in other people's psychological states. Here's how the trap works. Every time you successfully calm someone's anxiety or absorb their anger, you get a hit of validation that reinforces the persona. You start believing that your worth depends on your ability to emotionally regulate others. Jung called this the helper's high, a form of psychological addiction that keeps you trapped in codependent patterns. But the persona demands a sacrifice, your authentic emotional expression. You learn to suppress your own needs, minimize your own pain, and prioritize everyone else's feelings above your own inner truth. Jung wrote, "The foundation of all mental illness is the unwillingness to experience legitimate suffering." Your legitimate suffering includes the grief of not being seen for who you really are, the rage at having your boundaries constantly violated, and the terror of discovering what's left when you stop being everyone's emotional caretaker. The persona protects you from these painful truths, but it also prevents you from accessing your authentic power. Jung understood that persona breakdown is inevitable. There comes a moment when the false self can no longer sustain itself, when the emotional fusion becomes too exhausting, when the performance feels more like prison than purpose. This breakdown isn't pathology, it's the psyche's attempt to return you to your true self. The question isn't whether your empathic persona will collapse, but whether you'll have the courage to meet your authentic self when it does. You've likely suspected that Jung's map for empathic individuation requires what I call conscious separation, the psychological process of differentiating your authentic self from the emotional fusion you've been living in. Jung wrote, "Individuality is the opposite of being a member of a group, an institution, a race, or a nation. Your experience has probably shown you that individuation means learning to distinguish between your emotions and absorbed emotions, between genuine intuition and anxious hypervigilance, between authentic compassion and codependent caretaking. This process terrifies most empaths because it feels like betraying your core identity. You've likely encountered Jung's 4 stages of empathic individuation in your own journey. First comes shadow integration, consciously acknowledging your need to be needed, your anger at boundary violations, and your secret superiority complex about being more sensitive than others. This stage feels like dying because you're dismantling the identity that's earned you love and purpose. Second is persona dissolution, deliberately letting go of the role as everyone's emotional caretaker. Jung called this the dark night of the soul for empaths, because without the constant drama of other people's problems, you're forced to face the emptiness you've been avoiding. You discover that you don't actually know who you are when you're not fixing someone. Your deeper awareness recognizes the third stage, what Jung called active imagination.
Gosh, this is right on
Learning
point
to
with what I was
dialogue
wondering
with your own
about.
unconscious
I've got to figure out
instead
what
of
broke
constantly processing other people's
my
psychological
current
material.
struggles. That's
This
what I feel
means
like.
paying
I could be over the
attention to your
disassociation and
Honoring
CPD.
your own emotional
I feel like if I
needs
knew what
and developing
exactly
what I
broke,
call
I
internal
could get this under
empathy,
control.
the ability to feel and validate your own inner
And
experience.
I've been trying.
The fourth stage is
I know what I went through,
self-realization,
but it's something
the
broke. And
emergence of what Jung
even with
called
all that I went
the
through,
transcendent
because of what I've
function.
already been through in life,
This is where
I
you
know
develop
that's not
the
just what I went
capacity
through.
to
Like
feel
there's
deeply
something,
without losing yourself, to
there's
help others
something
without
to blame
abandoning your own needs,
that
to be sensitive without
could very well be
seeking support.
fixable
You've
if I
probably
could just figure out what it was
intuited
and
Jung's warning
process it.
that individuation isn't a linear process. He wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. You don't solve your empathic challenges, you develop a larger container that can hold both your sensitivity and your sovereignty. Comment if you've started setting boundaries and people called you selfish. I chose myself for the first time. Your wisdom recognizes that empathic individuation requires what Jung called holding the tension of opposites. You must learn to be both open and boundaried, both compassionate and self-protective, both sensitive and strong. This isn't about becoming less empathic. It's about becoming a conscious empath rather than an unconscious emotional sponge. Jung's most profound insight about empaths involves your connection to what he called the collective unconscious, the shared psychological inheritance of humanity. Jung wrote, "The dream is the small hidden door in the deepest and most intimate sanctum of the soul." Your empathic sensitivity isn't just picking up individual emotions. You're unconsciously accessing archetypal patterns that Jung identified as universal human experiences. What I call archetypal empathy explains why you sometimes feel overwhelmed in crowds, why certain people trigger inexplicable reactions, and why you can sense things about people that they haven't told you. Jung discovered that empaths are unconsciously channeling what he called archetypal energies, universal patterns like the mother, the warrior, the victim, the savior. When someone activates the victim archetype around you, your unconscious automatically responds by activating the savior archetype. You think you're being compassionate, but you're actually being possessed by an unconscious pattern. This archetypal possession explains why your empathic responses often feel compulsive rather than conscious. You're not choosing to absorb someone's anxiety, you're unconsciously resonating with the collective anxiety that particular person is carrying. Jung called
this is
this
why I don't understand why people can't just
participation
love their neighbors and treat them the way they want to be
psychological
treated.
state where you lose individual consciousness and become absorbed into collective psychological patterns. But here's Jung's revolutionary insight. Your empathic sensitivity can become a doorway to individuation rather than an obstacle to it. When you learn to consciously work with archetypal energies, instead of being unconsciously possessed by them, you develop what I call sacred empathy, the ability to help others without losing yourself. Jung taught that dreams are the primary way the collective unconscious communicates with individual consciousness. For empaths, dreams often contain guidance about how to maintain your authentic self while honoring your sensitive nature. Pay attention to dreams where you're setting boundaries, saying no, or protecting yourself. These are messages from your individuating psyche. The collective unconscious also speaks through what Jung called synchronicities,
That's interesting
meaningful
on the
coincidences
dreams.
that guide you toward individuation. When you start setting boundaries,
A dream I constantly have that has definitely impacted my life, and it seems like a negative way, but possibly a good way. It's probably given me the restraint necessary to survive traps that were laid. And the dream I constantly have is if I'm ever in a fight in a dream or trying to achieve something or something else, I always, like if I'm in a fight specifically, there's other similar examples, but I don't remember them. But a fight, I can't connect a punch in my dreams ever. Like I'm not scared. I got to do what I got to do. I'm not a bully. I'm not ever picking the fights. I'm not ever in a dream being a tough guy, beating people up. But I've been in fights and dreams, in self-defense or whatever, and I can't connect the punch. So even though I'm not scared, even though I know not to run from fights, even though I have reasons to have certain levels of confidence in myself because of that dream, I don't have confidence in aggression. If I otherwise would have, I don't because of that dream. Like, I don't. Like, I'm not going to run. So if I can't connect a punch in self-defense, then so be it. But I don't have the confidence to be an aggressor. And I don't feel inclined to be an aggressor, but I'm saying even if that may be protecting me with all the shit that I've been through. That may be why. That may have been like just a little extra protection from becoming an asshole as a result of what I've been through. Like I don't have any confidence in achieving anything by aggression. But I don't, and I'm saying that I'm not inclined to be aggressive, but even if I were, like I would have to like resist the feeling that I'm going to fail, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, that's a constant dream. And the problem, what sucks, is my life seems to mirror that dream. Like I legitimately did what I thought I was supposed to do to achieve what I thought I wanted, and I did. The problem is, when you want a family and to be married and all that stuff, that's a codependent dream. And not once, but twice, I have fully invested myself just to be completely fucked over. And this world doesn't care. And so I've only got one more time. The way I view it, I've only got one more shot at a relationship that's and I'm at the point that I have no basis for having confidence. I mean, I've got a much higher risk of getting in another relationship and cursing myself again here in America than I do of finally getting what I should have had, what I deserve to have all along. So, yeah. So I'm just not worried about that right now. But anyways, all right, back to where I was.
you might notice that healthier people suddenly appear in your life. When you begin honoring your own needs, you might find opportunities that support your authentic self-expression. Jung wrote, "Man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious." For empaths, this means becoming conscious of which archetypal patterns you're unconsciously carrying for others. Are you being possessed by the mother archetype, compulsively nurturing everyone around you? Are you channeling the wounded healer, staying stuck in your own pain to help others process theirs? If you've noticed that certain people consistently trigger the same response in you, comment, "I see the pattern now." The goal isn't to stop feeling archetypal energies. It's to develop conscious choice about when and how you engage with them. Jung called this active imagination, the ability to dialogue with archetypal forces instead of being overwhelmed by them. Jung's ultimate test for empathic individuation involves what I call the integration challenge, your ability to maintain authentic selfhood while remaining genuinely empathic. Jung wrote, "The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life." This integration isn't about becoming less sensitive. It's about developing what Jung called conscious empathy versus unconscious emotional absorption.
Oops.
Conscious empathy means you choose when to open your emotional boundaries and when to maintain them. You feel others' pain without taking it on as your own.
I could have done better,
You
but
offer
I'm not trying to
support
apply myself.
without
That's why I was playing a
sacrificing your
beginner,
own
so it's a
well-being.
flow state, stuff like
The
that.
integration test comes in 3 phases.
Anyways,
First
I'm
is
going to wrap it up
boundary
here.
consciousness, learning
I've
to
created a
distinguish
playlist
between
called
your
Empath,
emotions
so if you're
and
enjoying
absorbed
these,
emotions in
you can
real
subscribe to
time.
the channel. You can also,
This requires
not
developing what I
my
call
channel, but you can subscribe to the channel.
emotional sovereignty.
All these were from the same channel.
The ability to
Again, I
say,
created a
"This feeling
Empath
belongs to
playlist.
someone else,"
So I'm playing with this.
and
So if you're
consciously
fascinated
return
in
it without guilt
what you've
or
been listening
drama.
to, you can still do that on your
Jung
own.
discovered that
But I
integrated
play this for
empaths develop
CPTSD,
what
and
he
I've got in
called
enough
a
time.
transcendent
Let's see.
function,
My ankle monitor even
capacity
charged,
to
so now I
hold
can kind
opposites
of
in creative
figure out
tension.
what's next. What's next is I
Can be
got to do
both
something about these
vulnerable
kidney
and
stones. So I've got to stay physically
both
active,
open-hearted
which is
and
either
boundary,
I think about Beat
both
Saber, but
caring
screw that. I think I may go out
detached.
and push mow
This
my
isn't
yard. My
about
riding
being
mower is
cold
working
or
fine, but I may go out
It's
and push
about being
mow the
authentically
yard
present
just to
without
stomp
losing
around,
yourself.
try to break up these kidney
The
stones.
second
Make
phase
stuff
is
happen.
authentic response,
Have a good one, folks.
learning to respond from your true self rather than from empathic programming. Instead of automatically trying to fix everyone's emotional states,